All right, welcome back to Tapped In. We are now in episode 6, and today we're going to be talking about law, love, and little humans, which is a topic that comes up a lot with us. I think people have a particular fascination with the fact that we run a business and are married and have 3 boys, and how does that all work? So we're going to talk a little bit about what growing a family and a business together has helped us develop in our communication and our boundaries and our shared vision along the way. So we'll start a little bit really just with an origin story. How did this happen?
Well, I think we covered it in episode 1.
Stumble.
No, I think we covered it in episode 1, but I'll perhaps add to that and say I met you when you were my competition and we were both waiting to become prosecutors at the Tarrant County DA's office. I got the first job opening. You got the second. We were trial partners on and off, never assigned to the same court, but very successful together. And I pursued you for a long time. And eventually you said yes to dating me. And then eventually you said yes to marrying me. And then we had 3 little boys.
Well, what made us decide while we were dating / not dating to start a business together? Like, where did that come from?
Well, one of the really valuable lessons when we were dating and not dating was even when we were not dating or you didn't like me so much, we worked well together. And we knew that we could set aside some of the ups and downs and say, we have one thing that we're focused on at the time. It was trial or being really great prosecutors. And we were able to do that successfully, kind of regardless of what was going on in the world.
Well, was the firm like a honey trap? Were you like, if she starts a firm with me, it's going to be really hard for her to leave. I'm going to be around all the time. Proximity is super important to attraction.
You know, we can let people think I was that calculated. Yes, go for it.
Looking back, what do you remember about those early days of starting and growing the business together before we kind of transitioned into being a married couple?
We really worked together well. And you supported me in the firm even before you were part of the firm. We had a shared vision that we worked on together on how I was going to go out and either prove the concept or test the waters, and that you would eventually join me. So you were very supportive all along. So then when you joined me at the firm, some 6 months after I started, it was just natural. You knew from the moment I started planning what we were collectively trying to build. And so it was really seamless. You were with me not only during the planning, but the days when we're waiting for the phone to ring and focusing on all the things that now are the very fabric of our firm, the things that have become the core values and the culture of our firm.
Yeah, this idea that if I loved you when you had nothing and we're staring at the phone and nothing's happening, then how much more would love grow over the years where we're challenged together and growing a business together? No, it was a really interesting time. And I think not only because I shared your vision for the firm. That's true. And I also trusted in your ability to keep proving concept. Like, I've never known you to give up on anything. And that includes like your pursuit of me, romantically. It's just when you have something that you want and you have you build out a plan on how you're going to accomplish that. And then that's just it. Like, that thing is going to manifest and then happen. And so I really trusted that what you set out to accomplish, you were going to accomplish. And I was interested in how my role would play a part in that, whether it be professionally or personally, or it turns out to be both. And I think the big moment for me was when we were sitting down having the discussion on what ownership would look like, right, as founding members of the firm. And I was concerned about this idea that, being on an unequal footing, so to speak, would affect us not just personally, but professionally. And so when we were having that discussion and what ultimately came of our agreement, for me solidified, that you trusted me, that you believed in me, that you believed in us doing this together, which consequently also made me want to marry you. But that was a real turning point for me. And I think what's interesting when people talk about how can you work with your spouse, that seems rather complex and unnecessarily difficult. I always responded with, I don't know how you don't work with your spouse. Like, it would be complicated for me and difficult for me to be in business making these massive decisions that affect so many people, including my own family, without 100% absolute trust. And outside of marriage, I think that kind of trust is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to find. So I think being married is actually a benefit, when you're in business together. What do you think?
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit, and we have some friends who are family. We know brothers who are partners in law firms, but I agree that level of trust is so valuable. And we encourage our friends who may not be in business with a family member to just really aim for that, operate from a position of trust that you believe you're rowing in the same direction, to have the freedom to talk to each other, knowing that you're rowing in the same direction. But yeah, there's so much value in just having someone that you can truly blindly trust to say, this is the person at my side. And as we've talked about, you and I don't always see problems the same way or solutions the same way.
Very rarely do we see problems or solutions the same way.
So being able to have those conversations candidly is certainly of great value.
Well, I think you did hit on something really important, though, which is how you communicate with your business partner. And, being married, we know each other so well, and we have absolute trust that we are going to do what's best for our family, what's best for our firm, for our people, for our clients. And so knowing that as a foundational truth, we can really cut through a lot of the niceties when it comes to how we're working through a problem. And I think for us, that helps us resolve problems significantly faster than if we had to do this dance, right? I mean, you hear a lot of people talk about how you manipulate situations, or how you can persuade others to your opinion, or how you can, do these niceties and try to win people over to your side and put people in your camp. And that's one of the things about being married is like, we don't have to do any of those things, right? Like, I'm in your camp 100% of the time. And I think that really helps us efficiently attack some of those bigger problems.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's all you have to say as a husband, right? Yes, I agree.
There you go. That's it. Perfect answer.
That's the end of it. Was there anything that really surprised you about working together as husband and wife?
Well, again, to use ourselves as examples, because we have
nobody else to talk about.
Well, no, I'm thinking about another couple that we like quite a bit who run their own law firm. And I can't imagine them ever.
Shout out to the Galleon firm in Dallas.
That's right. Wonderful people, wonderful firm. That they would ever raise their voice or have heated disagreements. But what I find interesting is, we can both passionately believe our position is right and express that passionately at 8 a.m. And for 10 minutes, maybe even say, man, I don't understand why the other person is being so hard-headed. But by 9 o'clock, we have worked through the problem. We have found a solution, and now both of us are on board. The purpose of this podcast is not to necessarily encourage people to find their life partners and make them their business partners, even though that's worked out great for us. It is to talk about, well, how do you choose to spend your time so that you can, as we do, have 2 businesses that take a lot of our time. We have 3 kids. And the reality is
3 boys. There's a difference. I want to be clear.
There's definitely a difference. We're all boy all the time and wild and crazy and the best things in our lives. But how do you do that? And the answer is a lot of sacrifice, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are things that we are sacrificing to focus on the things that we want to focus on.
Well, and I think when people talk about the concept of balance, it's really just a misnomer, right? They just don't know what else to call it. Like, oh, I'm going to balance my work life and my home life. And I know we've talked about before, for us, it's never really about balance. It's about integration. So integrating your family into your workspace and making your office, our office, a family supportive place to be. A place where children are welcome and parents are free to be flexible with their schedules. I mean, I came screaming into this podcast, 15 minutes late because I was at the first grade play that our son just did where he was a snake, and it was hilarious. But that flexibility being incredibly important. But for me, balance, and I think specifically as a mom, which is difficult, it's not about balancing things 50-50, right? Because that's the idea that, okay, my work and my kids are the same and I'm going to commit the same amount of time to each. Balance for me is giving 100% of myself to the thing that matters most in that moment, right? So when I get to work, that thing is work, right? I'm focused on work. I'm having my meetings. I'm reviewing what I need to review. I'm making decisions. When I'm home, 100% of my focus is on what matters most in that moment, which is my kids and my husband. And sometimes, when the kids go down, that work-life balance is, comes back up a little bit where we'll start talking about something, but it's usually engagement, with each other. So I think it's an interesting place to be. And I don't know that I always thought I was going to end up in the position that I am now as a working mom. I think, and I don't know that any mom really does. I worked really hard to be a lawyer. I loved being an attorney. I loved being a practicing attorney. And when I was pregnant with our first child, I wanted to believe that I was going to come back and work. But I couldn't say that with 100% confidence, at the time. Because I don't know, as a first-time mom that you really have any idea until you start, working through that experience and that relationship and figuring it out. And I really got a lot of inspiration from some of the moms we work with here who have children. Some have special needs children, and they've been practicing lawyers for over 25 years and don't seem to have made a sacrifice of their family to make their careers work. So it's been an interesting transition, but I want to talk a little bit about why I think that was easier for us than it was for a lot of people. And that's because when we were having kids during COVID. And whereas I think pre-COVID, having kids screaming in the background of a client call or having a kid pop up on a Zoom call unexpectedly entering the room, right? Or taking your infant to work was the rarity, right? I think it was the exception to the rule. But during COVID, when everybody's home working, those interruptions became a part of a professional life. And I think we got, to a certain extent, a huge benefit of that. It kind of normalized bringing your kids to work, which I was laughing the other day because somebody had said, sometimes this office feels like the bring your kid to work day accidentally became every day because for 3 weeks straight, our 3-year-old was running around the office. But talk to us a little bit about what it was like, when we had our first child and I came back to work. I think I started coming back up to the office after 6 weeks. What was it like having a newborn in tow up here? And how did that help you develop what you would consider family supportive policies for the firm?
Yeah. So Knox was born just before the pandemic. So he was here. I have a picture I just looked at today. He was sitting on my desk, but he literally grew up here starting week 7. And being a firm where we had such great people around us, when you talk about the partners in this office who have special needs kids, what they have demonstrated to us is not only can they be phenomenal trial lawyers who are known everywhere for their trial skills and phenomenal parents, also phenomenal spouses. And they're just such great examples to be around. So from well before we had kids, we had this idea that we could be different and we could be a place that supported family and that we were blessed to work with the people that we worked with because part of the reason they were here is because we could be flexible. So even before Knox came along, we had this idea of that's what we wanted. So him being here around just really great people. I mean, he spent probably as much time on my desk as he spent on Brisha's desk, who's now our intake director, and many more hours in your office and the nursery we have at our office. And it was all just very natural because they were surrounded by good people, which is something we've always purposed to do, is to bring good people around us. And then, of course, for Wells and Case, they were truly pandemic babies. And so the change in the work environment wasn't just happening at our office where people were saying, hey, your kids are welcome to be here. And it wasn't just our kids. I remember our one of our director's son would come up here and play, I forgot what the system was, Xbox or PlayStation. And
He'd
that
bring
was
like the whole console and his own screen and everything. Yeah.
he'd
Like a
bring it out.
gaming chair and a blanket and a bag of Cheetos. It's like I walked into like an early 90s teenager movie.
Yeah. And now he's a football star, right?
Yeah.
Like, but at any phase, families were welcome. And putting kids aside for a moment, I've always taken great pleasure in someone's spouse coming to the office or parent coming to the office, because you don't take your family members to your office unless you really like being there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've always loved that. It's always been, yeah, bring your family to work because that makes us happy. And, our office is big enough and there are places where no one feels like, hey, they're going to be walking in front of clients or into conference rooms, that you could have your kid in your office or you could use the nursery without disruption.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that you said. And I think, at times as a new mom, when you're feeling overwhelmed, having that support system, not just of great people, but for me, powerful mothers who have kind of walked in those shoes before, and everybody kind of steps in to help. And I think part of like developing our family supportive policies was we had to figure out what worked for our family. I mean, for a while there, we had 3 boys under the age of 3 and a firm that was growing very quickly that demanded a lot of our attention, but mostly a lot of your attention during that time. And, undoubtedly there would be moments like where you just feel completely overwhelmed. And so what did you do during those moments where the boys were still really young? I was still, figuring out, how to do this working mom, bit, and the firm was growing as quickly as it did. What would you do when you felt overwhelmed?
Well, to go back to the word balance, I will admit, particularly before having kids and even more so before getting married, I've been a workaholic. I am a workaholic. So it's not.
Do you go to meetings for this? Do you have a sponsor?
I probably should. It's not so much about finding balance as it is finding what works for you. So in those times where I had a lot of work to do, I still focused on one thing, which is what you talked about, giving 100%. And for me, it was during the time that I'm with my family, I'm going to give 100% to my family. So for us, that's often been getting home somewhere between 5 and 6 o'clock and then focusing on until the boys go down. That's it. I'm not picking up my phone. I'm not picking up my laptop. I'm focusing on whatever it is that they need. And very early on, we would take shifts. So when Knox was still feeding, I would go home and work, work the shift from 5 to midnight so that you could catch a break. And then from midnight to 5, let's say, you were essentially on Knox duty, and that allowed you to get a break. But as they grew, that 5 to whatever time they go to bed has evolved to homework, sports, just having a good time with them. And then I don't feel guilty if as soon as they go down, I pick up my laptop and I'm working again. Or I wake up in the morning and before they come downstairs, I'm on my laptop and I'm working again. But
I do think part of that is like, because we work together and I understand, 1, the man that I married, 2, the business that we're in, the 3, the goals we're trying to accomplish. Like there's a lot of flexibility there for as soon as the boys go down for you to be like, I'm going to pull up my laptop and get back to work.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think a lot of times in marriages, the spouse would have an expectation of pay me attention now. Right.
Absolutely.
Let's sit down and have a chitty chat.
Yeah.
Right. Let's have some together time. And I think we are unique in that way. Like I'm demanding in a lot of ways, but not in that way of the time that I know you need. In figuring out how something was going to work for our family, we had to say, if this is what it takes for this workplace to work for us, this is what it's going to take for it to work for other families too. And so for us, it wasn't just extending, okay, I know I need a flexible schedule so that I can pick up one kid at 2:15 and go to another kid's, soccer practice at 4 and then still get my things done that I need to get done. If that's what it takes for for my life to work, then I've got to offer that same thing to the people on my team, right? Their needs and their desires are not different from mine.
Right.
Like they love their families. Most of us are working to better the lives of our families and our community. And so by extension, everything that we benefited from, we turned around and said, this is for you all as well. And I think that we've had incredible response to that, especially from the working mothers, for how it has shaped them building their families, what their family planning has looked like, having the freedom and the flexibility to do so many of the things that they love, because I don't think they ever want to feel like they have to work or they have to stay home. I think they've loved the idea I can actually do both of these things well because I'm in a workplace that allows for that flexibility. What do you think has been kind of the long-term benefit from a business perspective of having that kind of family supportive?
Well, it's been tremendous in terms of the folks that we have, and I don't want to just limit it to working moms or women. One of our top paralegals is a guy who gets here very early in the morning. And because he gets here early in the morning, his 8 hours, is done early afternoon. And that's so he can spend time with his daughter because he doesn't want to miss her games or the functions that she has. And that schedule allows him to do that. Melody McDonald has been with us for nearly a decade, and she runs all of our marketing and media and communications. She's never missed one of her son's football games. And that's something she brags about. And some days that means she leaves at 2. But the reality is we all come into this understanding we're professionals. It doesn't really matter what time you clock in or what time you clock out. We're going to get the things that we need to get done. And so that means sometimes people are, in an airport lobby working on something to catch their flight to go on vacation, or it might be that they're working Saturday at 2:00 because they weren't here on Friday. It's the flexibility we've given ourselves, and it's the flexibility we've given our team. And because of that, we have tremendous people who, if we compare ourselves to other law firms, our turnover rate is very low, particularly when you look at people who are a good fit. In other words, if you exclude people who were terminated for a specific reason, people are here and they stay here because they appreciate the flexibility that we've given them.
Well, and is there anything about raising a family, becoming a father, that has changed the way you lead the firm? I know we've talked a little bit about how it's impacted the policies that you have or the firm culture, but is there anything that's changed about the way you lead or what your vision is since you've become a father?
No one else is going to agree with me on this, but I am definitely softer as a father and as a human being now that I have kids. And I don't necessarily wear that on my sleeve, but how I evaluate things and how things affect people and what's important in life has certainly changed.
I mean, I would agree with that. I think as a trial lawyer before we had children, I was in this constant adversarial space, right? You're fighting pretty consistently throughout the course of a trial. Even when you're in negotiations, it feels like a battle. I was wearing that energy all the time. I was defensive a lot of the time. I took things personally. I'd let things get under my skin because everything was a big deal, right? Everything was huge. And after kids, I, no longer wanted to be in that adversarial space because I didn't want to bring that energy home to my little babies. But 2, everything just got put in perspective. Big things were microscopic now compared to the gravity and the importance of this child, right? And this child's presence in my life. And, I was even having dinner with my mother recently. And she said, you have really evolved as a person. And I took that as a huge compliment because I think it's incredibly difficult to do that work on yourself, especially being grown, right? I'm 40 years old. Most people wouldn't expect me to change at this point in my life. But I attribute a lot of that evolving as a person to becoming a mother, and the perspective that it gives on everything else, and making everything else significantly smaller to the point where it affects you less. It stirs your emotions less, right, in comparison. And it makes it a lot easier to digest workplace drama or work through solutions or kind of brush off the side comments, that happen during negotiations. Like, that's not personal, and just move forward, because what you're going home to, or kind of what you're wanting to accomplish, is so much bigger than the feeling you have in that moment. But on the topic of kind of disagreements or navigating, what we take from work home, you talked a little bit earlier about, we don't agree on a lot of the problems and a lot of the solutions, and we work together on trying to find one that we can agree on. But how do we navigate a workplace disagreement once we get home?
Problems in business can focus on or be centered on policies and procedures. They can also be focused on people. So for the latter category, what I find is, between the two of us, our conversations at home always end with showing more grace than perhaps we would have defaulted to if we had done it alone, right? Because in the moment, something comes up, there's a problem with people. You are maybe upset in the moment because you see it your way. But when you and I talk, the other person usually can give a different perspective. So you address that problem with a better perspective, maybe a more well-rounded perspective, and in my opinion, oftentimes with a lot more grace than if you had tried to tackle that problem on your own. So I think that's been valuable in terms of our sounding board. In terms of policies and procedures, we have kind of relegated those to what we're each really good at. So if I feel like you're really good at a certain aspect, you're in the financial numbers a lot more than I am, I'm going to give you deference on that. If it's something related to what technology can do, just as an example, you'll probably defer to me on that. So in some aspects, we just have our own roles. And in some aspects, it's just great to have a sounding board where we can come up with something what we hope is reasonable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the question, though, was more so our conversations that start at work where we're in disagreement on something, and then we go home and we're with our kids. What does that transition look like? Like, is it just a cold stop? We're not talking about this anymore. And then as soon as the kids are down at 8 p.m., it's like the door opens and we're yelling. Or, I mean, what does that transition look like?
I think we've seen a little bit about that. We certainly
We've tried a lot of things.
We've certainly
it's like a trial and error process. What works?
That's right. Well, we've certainly purposed that we're not going to talk about work around the kids, because we want the time with the kids to be focused on family. So we're really good at that. Whether or not we pick up a conversation that ended at 5, right at 8:01, has varied, right? And the older I get, the more I kind of default to the way I used to be, which is give it time, think through the problem. You don't have to address it right now, because if I address it in the moment, I'm more likely to address it based on emotion or how I feel, as opposed to logic, which is where I'd much rather reside.
Well, I know a lot of people say, don't go to bed angry. We do that like a fair amount. And I think for us, it's the recognition, like, I can have an emotional or visceral response to something, but if I respond to that right now, it is going to get worse, right? Because I'm reacting based off of emotion. If I get a good night's sleep and I wake up with a clearer head, I've usually done some self-reflection. I've usually worked through the issue and kind of where it gets us if I tackle it this way. And now my reaction looks very different, right, in the morning. So what could be a knockdown drag out over the course of an hour in the evening trying to resolve something before you go to bed so you don't go to bed angry, could be a 5-minute calm, grace-filled conversation at 6 a.m. And so there are just some things I think we've kind of turned on their heads that have just worked better for us. And I would say that that's one of them.
Yeah, I'm not sitting here suggesting to anyone else that these are the definitive ways to do things, but I find it very hard to wake up angry.
Mm-hmm.
I may have
He's like, I'm alive. It's a new day.
I may have gone to bed upset about something, but it is just really hard for me to be upset in the morning. There's so much to do, so much opportunity. Whatever the problem was, I usually wake up with, what, let's just get down to the nuts and bolts and here's what we need to do. It's a new day.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, we've talked about marriage, we talked about kids. I want to talk a little bit about legacy as we wrap up, which is, you probably had an idea as to what you wanted your life to look like or your legacy to be as a young man. How has having a family changed that, if at all?
Well, I don't know that I always knew what my legacy would look like, but certainly being a father, I've thought a lot about what my legacy should look like. And first and foremost, it's faith and love of family. If I will admit I'm not the best at evangelizing, but I feel like your family is partially your responsibility. Of course, they've got to make their own decisions, but as a father and a leader, I've got to show them the right way, and that's part of it. And that's the most important legacy. The other part of the legacy, though, is who do we train our boys to become? And candidly, when you are at the level of a law firm owner, I think one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, how do your kids see adversity, right? My kids are not growing up anything like I grew up. And I think part of what gave me grit and gumption and the will to go on despite all odds is I've been through difficult things. Our kids don't necessarily see those things in the same way. So I have actually really enjoyed the fact that, for example, getting into baseball this season, and I know it's a far cry from not knowing where your next meal is going to come.
Far cry from the rubber plantation.
But starting in a sport where they had no experience and they did not, in the first games or practices, want to be there because they like being successful, and not being successful at something, even for a moment, is really hard for them in their minds, right? So seeing some adversity, seeing something that they get to work through to get better at. And of course, life will present all kinds of opportunities for that. But that's something that I hope to instill in them, is to be men of character, men who have perseverance and love their family. I mean, if you do those things and love God, then, the rest of it will follow. I'm not so much worried about, are they going to go to law school? Are they going to someday take over the firm? Are they going to become astronauts or any of those things? Because I think if you pour yourself into whatever you love and you're good at and you get the rest of it right, you're going to find a way. And, as much as the metrics in a business are or include how are you doing financially as a business, that's not one of the top metrics for me when it comes to my family. And we've always talked about, whether we have what we have today, more or less, we are always going to be who we are and do the best with what we've got. And I like to say money won't make me, and it's not going to break me, and I don't want our kids, we live in a world where everything is on social media, and whether people have it or not, it's on Instagram. And then the people that may not have it feel depressed because they don't look like the next guy or girl. We have to know we have to be prepared to raise kids in that environment and still teach them those aren't the things that are important.
Well, and to that end, is there anything specific you want them to learn by watching us, mom and dad, run this business together?
Yeah, that we have each other's backs. We treat people well, and how we treat people says a lot about who we are and what we truly believe, that our actions speak a lot louder than words, that we're here to serve others, whether that's our spouse, the people that we work with, the community that we live in, and that your character counts for a whole lot, who you are as a person. And that's really emphasized where we are. We started in what is still a tight-knit legal community, and everyone knows if you have poor character, if you're not trustworthy, whether you're practicing for 2 years, 10 years, or 4 decades, those things follow you around. And so as our kids look at us and what we've built, I want them to think about, what it takes to have people think of you favorably in the sense of they're trustworthy people who will do the very best that they can for you and by you.
Well, as we wrap up here, and this being the Tapped In podcast, what advice would you give to married couples or business partners to really get tapped into growing a business together?
Honesty and the ability to not feel like you have to obfuscate, right? I don't have to, as you put it earlier, I don't have to manipulate you to get to the decision that I want you to get to. Instead, we're both coming to the table saying, our end goal is to be successful. I've got an idea of how to get there. You've got an idea how to get there. We're going to listen to each other. And
then we're going to go with my decision.
And we're going to find value in each other's opinion and ultimately try to find the path that's best for you collectively. And if you can do that, then you will ultimately be making many more right decisions than you will wrong decisions. And ultimately that'll put you out ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think that success for us isn't about doing it all. It's about doing what matters most together. And that's it for our episode 6 of Tapped In. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.